WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 FM, your station for progressive information. WRFG provides a voice for those who have been traditionally denied access to broadcast media through the involvement of a broad base of community elements to guarantee that access. In the utilization of the Foundation's facilities and in its programs, the following communities will receive first priority: those who continue to be denied free and open access to the broadcast media, and those who suffer oppression or exploitation based upon class, race, sex, age, creed, disability, sexual orientation, or immigrant status.
We cannot lie our way to the truth. We cannot lie our way to the truth. We spin and spin the earth around.
All right, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I want to welcome you all to our discussion this evening that I'm really looking forward to. Actually, tonight, I'm going to be talking with co-producer Ernest Dunkley. We've not done this on the show, just have a discussion about him and his remarkable background, so I decided that's what we're going to do tonight. I decided. Where do you go with that, Ernest? I decided this because it's important that for everyone to know more about your background as well, which is just so remarkable. So, all right, the question is, Ernest, where do we start with this?
Well, anywhere you would like to, Heather. I mean, you can throw the ball up in the air and see where it bounces.
I'm throwing the ball up in the air. That's right. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You're originally from New York, is that correct?
Brooklyn, New York.
And that's where you were born?
Bed-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, Crown Heights, Flatbush, Williamsburg.
Wow.
Brooklyn.
So you were born in New York, and how long were you there as a child growing up?
Actually, about 18 years.
Okay, all right.
I was born there, and then I left when I was 18. I went into the Air Force.
Okay.
And then I really never really went back. I went back for a while, for maybe 10 years or so, but I kept coming and going.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that too, but let's just talk about growing up in New York, what it was like.
Whoa. Well, it was after the Second World War, and the dynamics were tremendous. The dynamics at that time were tremendous.
Why do you say that?
Well, my uncles, let's see, my grandmother or my mother had about, how many brothers were there? There must have been 5 brothers. And 2 of them were off to the war. 3 of them went into the war. But one of them came back from Russia, Uncle Ernest. And he was just glowing and enthused about what he had seen in Russia at that time. And he was telling me, at that time I might have been about 6 years old.
Oh, wow, really?
And I always had this ear for geography, or say foreign places.
Right,
other than where I am. You mean, is there somewhere else?
Right.
And what goes on there?
Yeah, right.
And he was saying that in Russia, the Germans had killed so many Russians, and and the women had stepped up in such a way that he had never seen women like that in his life. These women were in every area of industry. They had taken over for the men, because there were millions and millions of men killed in that war. We never really understand how many Russians were destroyed.
I see.
And he says to see the way the women took hold and ran everything was tremendous.
Yeah, because that's not something you would have seen in the United States.
Not at all. So
saying.
that and Charlie Parker.
We're talking about in the war. I mean, we're talking about which war are we talking about?
Second World War.
The Second World War. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about the Second World War with the Germans and the Japs,
right?
And all those bad guys and all of that.
Right.
And the cowboy movies.
Yeah.
6-shooter, the Peacemaker. The Peacemaker is what made America. That's what I was told when I was trying to buy a BB gun.
What do you mean by Peacemakers? What do you mean?
Well, Peacemaker was the gun, the revolver that they say won the West, because the revolver, it allows you to shoot 6 shots right away. Bang, 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 bang. Like, just as fast as you could fan the action back. And it was called the Peacemaker because it killed all the Indians.
Oh, wow.
And that was part of our heritage, that you had to have that in your gun collection. That and the Winchester that would, gave you rapid fire, so one person could take out a group of them. And this has always been our thought, how to take out a group of people, one guy.
Wow.
All
So, but let's get back to the Winchester, though, the weapon. So you're saying that a lot of folks, you were talking about this, but are you saying that a lot of folks had these weapons in New York? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you're
but
saying.
But at that time, the black guys didn't have that many. It was usually the guys from the South that really had
okay.
Or the guys that had an education in the street. But generally, guns weren't a big thing that you saw like that.
Okay.
Not as they are now.
Right.
It was a lot of it. The big gangs came out at that time, and you could get a fair fight. That would mean that you and the person could go mano a mano, and everybody would stand back and let it happen and make that the decision.
Well, Ernest, let's just talk about some years here. So we're talking about being in New York. We're talking about in part of the 40s and into the 50s, right? That's what we're talking about here. So where were you, like, say, in New York, you were going around, you were exploring as a youth all the different neighborhoods in New York, were you?
Yeah, I was.
So tell us about that.
I was kind of strange like that, but...
okay, but what about that? What were you doing?
Well,
you went to Harlem?
It was easy for us because we moved all the time.
What, the family moved all the time?
Yeah, because there was a lot of moving from one house to another place another place.
I see.
And it was always about trying to find I don't know what the problem was. They had the money. It wasn't like we were being put out of anywhere. But it was always like trying to find a nicer apartment, maybe. That's what
I
it
see.
was.
I see.
So we went from one side of town to the other side of town, and this New Yorkers do this. This is a New Yorker.
Really?
Oh yeah.
They want to check out new neighborhoods.
Well, you want to get a better apartment somewhere, and you get a good deal.
Okay, all right. Okay.
On the rent.
Right.
You're renting. You're not buying. You're renting, which is see here in the South, you got your own houses, so you think about buying a house. In New York, we think about just renting a space for a period of time.
I see.
Yeah.
So you had the opportunity to explore a lot of different communities in New York, is what you're saying.
The Jewish community.
Yeah. Okay.
The Latino community, the Puerto Rican community, the West Indian community, the Trinidadian, the Jamaican communities.
Wow.
And the European communities.
So it's what's fascinating about this also is that the various groups, which makes sense, they would gravitate together, right?
Oh yeah.
Whether you're the Jewish, the Latino, the
oh yeah,
whatever.
they were, and in fact there were so many newspapers at that time. Each group had a newspaper.
Oh yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense.
I mean, there were newspapers. You go to the
That's
newspaper
nice.
stands, and they could be 10 newspapers there easily.
Oh wow.
The Jewish, the Greek, the Russian, Polish, the Spanish, and which kind of Spanish? What do you mean Spanish, or do you mean Latino? It was quite a wonderful affair.
Well, were the different groups getting along with each other largely, or no?
Very much.
Was there communication between the different groups?
It was always communication. It was about power and utility.
Okay.
I mean, what were you good for? And how much power you had.
What do you mean by power?
Could you protect yourself?
I see.
As a group, as a community.
I see.
That's why there was Little Italy, Chinatown.
Right.
Polish area, the Russian area, which came later. Right. And so on and so on.
Okay. So you were, I know you would have seen these newspapers. I don't know, were you looking at the newspapers as well from different communities?
I couldn't read their language,
right.
But I was delivering newspapers for the Brooklyn Eagle, and
oh, you were. Okay.
And then in school they taught us to read newspapers were part of the classwork. You learn how to read the New York Times.
Oh, okay.
You learn how to, because the New York Times is such a large newspaper,
right?
And the trains are so crowded. You had to learn how to fold your newspaper in order to get arm space in the crowded subway to read.
Wow.
So that was part of the skills that they taught you in school, in grammar school, was how to fold a newspaper as you read it.
Well, what about newspapers from the black community in New York?
There were quite a few newspapers from
so
the
what
black
are some
community.
what are some examples?
There was the Amsterdam in New York.
Right, the Amsterdam News. Yeah. It's still there, right? The Amsterdam News.
The Amsterdam, they should be still there.
Yeah.
They may be publishing electronically at this
Right.
time, though.
Yeah. But go ahead.
There was, coming from Philadelphia, there was the Philadelphia paper. Hard for me to pull up some of the names of them. The Inquirer. There was in New York, of course, there was the communist newspaper. There was a communist newspaper that a labor newspaper that was all the labor unions had newspapers.
That was distributed openly.
Yeah, that was on the same newsstand.
Yeah, right,
There
okay.
would be a stand, and
Right.
all of these papers would be laid out there,
Right,
and you
right.
just picked up the one that was relevant to you.
Okay.
Then when you went around Times Square, you really could get newspapers from really everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So going
right.
down to Times Square to pick up a newspaper, you could pick up the London Times or whatever language you spoke, you could get a language from that country there.
Now, being black in New York, right?
Yeah.
As you were, so I know that the area that most people in the United States will think about, that I think about as well, is Harlem. Were you going into Harlem much?
As soon as I could.
What do you mean as soon as you? Because you get why did you feel that way?
Well, because that's where the happening was. You see, living in Brooklyn. Okay, so my father is Jamaican and my mother's Trinidadian.
Okay.
And at that time, the Trinis, listening to my grandmother talk, she really didn't have a great love for Jamaicans. She thought they weren't trustworthy.
Wait a minute. Now, the grandmother is from
My mother's mother,
and she's from
Trinidad,
right?
and
okay.
she wasn't happy when my mother married a Jamaican.
I see.
That was
I see.
a
The
dumb
real split
move.
here. Oh, I see.
Oh, that was
okay.
a dumb move. How could you
why,
be so
why
dumb?
Why is that? Why this
Well,
conflict?
there was this inter-island thing.
I see.
There was this inter-island thing.
Right.
The racism from the top really filtered down, and whether you call it tribalism, racism, or what, but there was a lot of ism. There were a lot of blacks trying to be whites, so they were, the color thing was a big thing in the black community always.
Well, we're going to get back to more of that, but we're going to take a quick break, Ernest. We'll be back in just a second. Stay tuned.
We cannot lie our way to the truth. We cannot lie our way to the truth. We spin and spin the earth around.
We want to say thank you to everyone who's taken us up on a request to like WRFG 89.3 FM on social media. Just doing this one thing means so much to all of our volunteers who are doing what they need to do to keep themselves and their families safe and healthy, and still bring you the progressive information and hand-picked quality music programs you've come to expect from your independent community radio station. If you haven't liked us yet on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, please do. Our station Facebook page is WRFG 89.3 FM. On Twitter and Instagram, you'll find us at WRFG Atlanta. You'll find direct links to all three on our webpage, WRFG.org. And please tell your friends about WRFG and ask them to like us too. In Atlanta, we're 89.3 FM. You can listen to us worldwide over our free mobile app and WRFG.org.
Again, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace. And this evening, I'm interviewing co-producer Ernest Dunkley about his fascinating background. We were talking about New York, which is where he was born, and as a youth, how he began to explore all the different neighborhoods in New York. So when we took that break, Ernest, we were talking about Harlem. So you said when you were able to get to Harlem, or how did you say that? When
I was able to reach up that high, to reach that shelf.
How old were you?
Well, I was 16.
Oh, okay.
And then New York has a transportation system that goes 24/7. So you could climb on the subway at any time of the day or night and go anywhere.
Okay.
Anywhere in like a 30-mile radius.
Right. Well, as a youth, what were you hearing about Harlem? What
Well,
interested you about
it was more than hearing, is that my father's side of the family was coming from Harlem, and my mother's side of the family was in
okay.
Brooklyn. They met at a place called the Savoy Ballroom.
Oh, they did really?
Yeah, they met at the Savoy Ballroom,
Wow.
and they danced and all of that and fell in love.
Yeah.
And then he started to come to Brooklyn to visit my mom, and his friends thought he was crazy because Brooklyn was where all the bad guys lived. The real
Oh, I
tough
see.
gangsters
I
were
see.
in Brooklyn,
Oh, okay.
and you really stayed away from that, you
Yeah.
know. So, but he eventually got hooked and got married. So then, at an early age, I was always going over to Manhattan, to Harlem with my pop.
Oh, okay.
So I got to know Harlem that way, and it was like, whoa. New York, Brooklyn was a lot laid back and a little more provincial, but Harlem was like, whoa, clickety-clack, moving along. And the music captivated me. And the music was held in the bars and the nightclubs. You had to be 18 years old to get in or look like it.
Oh, okay.
So I could
They
look...
didn't ask for ID?
Only if they, they
Only if
really
they
didn't.
got a
If you had them to assume that you were, and how you did that, you dressed the part.
Okay.
You dressed like a gentleman,
Yeah,
like
that
or a
makes sense.
musician.
Right.
And you had the moves, and you could move in and say, rum and coke, please. And
Yeah.
then you were in, and you were
Yeah.
sitting listening to Art Blakey and
Wow.
Max Roach.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And it went on and on. I lived in Birdland. Birdland was a nightclub on Broadway where bebop was king.
Oh.
It's that style of music that came in after swing. And right up the street was the Palladium, where the Latinos did all the salsa was being nailed into New York culture. And Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, Pacheco, all of the great musicians were up there. Exactly 2 blocks away, a block and a half away from Birdland. So we'd go between Birdland and the Palladium, and the culture there, it was mind blowing between the bebop, the hip black thing, and then the hip Latino thing, which was the Palladium, which is.
Wow.
And that was really the cultures of the Americas, the Caribbean, all of that sort of came to a bloom right there
The blending,
on
yeah.
Broadway. And that area is called 52nd Street, where all of the jazz clubs were. And so that's where I really grew up, really. As soon as I could get to 52nd Street, I had the clothes, the right coats and shoes, and, and look the gentleman in a hat. Once you were able to get your first fedora, you were in,
Oh,
a
wow.
cap, and yeah.
So what was it like even just walking down the street in Harlem? Were there people... Was there music on the streets as well? Or what was it like?
Harlem was a fiesta every day, really, of sound and people.
We're talking the mid-50s here, is that correct?
I'm talking the early 50s, yeah.
Early 50s.
Mid 50s.
Early to mid-50s.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So what was it like? It was like...
Well, number one, in the early 50s, for me, early would be like Second World War,
Yeah,
1945.
Okay.
I can remember that no one locked their door.
Yeah, right.
No one locked their door in Harlem.
Yeah.
There was no one breaking into apartments. Heroin was really not used, maybe in the back corner somewhere. Dope was always a part of America, in
Right.
fact, the driving force in America.
Yeah.
And it has been that way. But it was a lot more under control until the government started smuggling it into Harlem like that to destroy the community.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's when you really saw it was another world altogether.
When was that actually?
Well, the dope started coming into that I could notice it on the street in the late early 50s was when it really hit.
I see. Yeah.
When it really hit was in the early 50s. But coming back from the Second World War World War opened up everything that was already opened up anyway.
Right.
And so there were larger appetites after
What I find intriguing, too, is that we're talking here about the blend of so many different cultures in Harlem.
It was the blend of social levels that I miss. The Shoeshine Boy lived around the corner from Adam Clayton Powell, who lived up the street from Count Basie and Duke Ellington, who lived around the corner from Langston Hughes.
Wow.
So you saw all of these people every day. Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson. They had nightclubs and bars on the street. You just walked in and had a drink. Wow. Count Basie. It was that. And everyone was connected. Right. You were all part. The Shoeshine Boy was not looked down upon in the way that you might know. He was the kid that was coming up, man. You say, hey, kid, how you doing today?
Yeah.
You know, what you doing? Yeah, all right, here's a tip, and you give him another dime.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
And then they would come to you for, hey, Mr. So-and-so, can you help me to get this job? Or can you help me do this? And can you, yeah, come on, kid, let's do this, you know.
Okay.
And it was like that. It really was. And I miss that. Now you have these communities that are for people that want to buy a house for $200,000 or the $500,000 or the $1 million developments. But what you're now having is a stratification that takes all the flavor out of the soup.
Yeah, okay, so let's just get back to that for a moment. So you're talking about how there was just a blend of cultures and class and just everything.
Everybody living together.
Everybody living together.
In a few mile space. And everybody really trusting one another to a great degree so that you didn't really lock your apartment. There wasn't the hungry dope person that needed, the drug person that needed money that was breaking into apartments, or the children that were out of control that disrespected. There wasn't any out of control children. There wasn't any children walking up to you and asking you, taking money from you like they are now.
Well, I'd like to just go back just for...
When I say children, I mean like teenagers. Those were children then.
In your family, though, where your parents came from, they were living in New York, but their families came from...
From Trinidad and from Jamaica.
From Trinidad and Jamaica. So when did they come to the United States?
Well, my grandmother came back in 1919.
Okay.
1819 from Trinidad.
Okay.
My father and his family, they were coming in about that same time, then in the early 20s. Well, he came in the 20s because he was not as old as my grandmother.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And they came. They came in, this, on the boat past the Statue of Liberty to Governor's Island there, where they were brought in so legally and all of that. Though I don't know if that really concerned them that much, but it was a different time.
So your parents were born here in the United States, were they?
No. I was the first. I was part of the first group born in the Americas. That makes sense.
So they were born. Your parents were born in Jamaica and Trinidad as well.
Right.
Okay, all right. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so
and like I was going to say that my father's family didn't want him, associating with my mother's family because they were lighter than my mother's family.
Oh, is that right?
So they thought. They didn't see the other half of the family.
Well, growing up, were you hearing about Trinidad and Jamaica as well from your parents and your parents?
Oh, I mean, and that was a constant thing. I mean,
it was constant.
Oh, that was constant. But for me, I just thought it was cute and with love, and really was for me. The dynamics of the Caribbean, they're all products of colonialism, colonial brutality that twisted people.
Oh, I see, yeah.
That made yellow-complected people better than dark-complected people.
Mm-hmm.
And that still exists to a degree, the striving to look white or the striving to look this way or that way. In Japan, they're striving to look black.
Well, right. So were you talking about the the racial composition, is that a discussion, or racism, or
racism was always a discussion.
It's a dialogue.
I mean, it had to be, because it was white people checking the world with it. You'd better be talking about racism.
Okay. So you were doing that in your family?
Well, there were sides of the family that were able to take advantage of being lighter.
Okay.
And would push it just like white people do today.
Yeah.
Every white person pushes that. Come on now. They don't, whether they realize it or not.
Right.
They take advantage.
Yeah.
And those that can, they say if you're light, you can step forward. If you're dark, you got to melt back. And those that were light step forward and do.
Well, let's get back to Trinidad.
And that's a big thing in Africa, too.
Yeah, right.
Skin bleaching.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
To step forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the that European influence, money, capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism, slavery is built on capitalism.
That's
capitalism
absolutely right.
Capitalism is built on slavery.
Exactly.
Because in order to capitalize on someone, you really need to have them by the neck, so you can really get it out of them.
But I want to get back to you. We can talk. I know this that's a discussion we could go on forever, and we need to have more of that. I know, but just getting back to your experience in New York. So the discussions you were having about Trinidad and Jamaica, you were intrigued with this, or?
Well, no. Well, I mean, it's history.
Yeah, right. I mean, did you want to go and visit as well?
I wanted to go everywhere. I wanted to go everywhere.
Which you've done, actually, Ernest.
Yes, and I've been working at it and still continue to work at that.
Exactly.
And it's well worth it. I want to tell people that the best education you can ever get is not in the book and not in the school. It's going there, sitting down with the people, living with the people, understanding the people, walking in their shoes, and then you really know something.
Right.
I got my greatest education in Nigeria.
Well, I want to talk about Nigeria as well, but just getting back to New York.
Okay.
So when did you, well, actually, before I do that, I want our listeners to know you are listening to WRFG Atlanta 89.3 FM. My name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace. I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and I'm talking with Ernest Dunkley about his background. It's just so fascinating. So when did you leave New York?
When I was 18. Joined the Air Force.
And you joined the Air Force. So where did you go in the Air Force?
Well, they taught me about photography, which is what I wanted to. See, at that time, the government had a thing that said, well, they were trying to get us in there, boy. Oh, did they want our bodies? Well, they'd send you where you wanted to go in the world.
They wanted black folks, you're saying?
They wanted anybody's body at that time.
Okay, all right.
But, black folks before them, yes. They were feeding us into the machine first.
Right.
So, I had a choice of where I wanted to go and what school. So I picked photography because there was this artist thing going inside of me. And I took Europe and Japan. I couldn't get Europe, but they sent me to Tokyo. And I'm glad they did that.
Right. So how old were you when you were in Tokyo?
18 to 21.
Okay, so tell us about your time you enjoyed that. I
love Tokyo. I wasn't coming back to America.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hell
why
no.
did you like it?
Because it was freedom that you didn't have, that wasn't possible to me here in America.
Oh,
in every way.
So it's a different attitude toward black folks? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, very much so.
Oh, yeah, okay. All
very
right.
much so. Not only a different attitude. So one of my dearest friends, Takeo Shiki, who's passed away, a great Japanese artist.
Okay.
We met in Tokyo, and we met around the music because jazz was the music of the world. Jazz really influenced the way you thought. It was almost like taking acid. No, it was exactly like taking acid.
Right.
It opened up your head to different ways of thinking and different streams of colors. And the Japanese are right on everything. They're right there. I love them. So at one point he says to me, Ernest, sing. You know that song? You know that tune? So will you sing that? And I said, Shiki, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, sing. I said, man, is that all you think black people do is sing and dance? And then he looked at me. He said, yeah, MF, don't you know that? That's what you people do. You sing and dance. You are the innovators. He says, I can't do it until I see you do it. He says, I can do anything better than you, but I got to see you do it first.
Yeah.
So do something so I can copy it. And I love Shiki because he opened me up to what it was to be black.
Okay.
He says, no, we're watching you. We're watching you, so do something. So I realized instead of staying in Japan and marrying one of those beautiful Asian women, I had to come back to Africa, come back and find Africa.
Oh, okay.
So then Africa at that point became my goal to see, well, what was I not truly understanding about being black? I mean, what does he see that I haven't picked up on? And that's when I came back to the States instead of staying, and aimed myself at trying to get to Africa as soon as I could.
Wow. So I need to say, in the 1990s, I was in Tokyo for a little while as well, and what impressed me is the youth in downtown Tokyo. They all had their dreads, their pants down, and so forth. They were imitating the black community here.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
sort of been an ongoing pattern.
Great love affair, quietly
Exactly.
kept, because the older Japanese are like old white people,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're old yellow people,
Okay, so you came back to the United States, and that was the end of your Air Force experience. Is that correct?
I still had some time because I came back and another great, wonderful thing happened in that I came back as a teacher, an instructor in the Air Force, and I taught in the first school that used television as a teaching aid.
Really?
To teach electronics and special systems that the government had. In fact, I worked with the first computers in 1956 in that spy plane that was shot down with Gary Powers.
Yes.
I was the guys that were loading that stuff.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
wow,
in Japan.
fascinating.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Fascinating.
And so I came back, and they put me in as an instructor, and television was being tried out to be an aid for the teachers in the classroom. So they would do 4 hours with a real instructor and 4 hours with watching the material that I was part of programming for the television.
Wow.
And that's when I really really looked at the power of TV.
Okay, so let me just talk about myself as well. Let me just mention I'm originally Canadian. When I came to Canada, from Canada to the United States in the 1950s, early 1950s, there was no television in Canada at the time. So I was telling, and there was some in the United States, so I was telling my young colleagues, right, that I was going to this country where they have radio with a picture. That's what I
Right.
okay, radio
That's
with a
what
picture.
it is.
So yeah, so fascinating. Ernest.
Oh yeah, that was quite in so many different ways. So many things happened around that
period. Why? Because
that
of the new
education with
technology?
in the military and watching how the racism on the inside, and that everyone wasn't racist, and how that interacted and how that can lift you up.
Yeah.
And that I had a racist sergeant over me, and he thought he was showing me something by getting rid of me. And he said, "Oh, they got some new kind of section over in such and such. I want you to go over there and you'll be with them." I said, "All right, Sarge."
Okay.
And when I went over and found out what it was, this working with civilians that were artists that were drawing all of the artwork for this teaching, using television as a teaching tool.
Wow.
And when the sergeant finally, about a month or so later, happened to come by to see how I was doing, he was he was shocked when he saw me sitting with all of these beautiful white ladies.
Yeah. So yeah.
And tried to get me
He
back.
was probably envious.
Oh yeah, he tried to pull me out of there, but the white lady said, "No, he can't go. He's got to stay."
Well, now we're talking about the Air Force, but we're talking about also your interest in art. It's ingrained in your family, I think, Ernest.
Yeah,
this
we're
interest
hooked.
in art.
Yeah, on both sides of the family.
Well, okay, so tell us a little bit about that. What do you mean both sides?
Well, my mother's side and my father's side, they're great artists. Some of them were not as recognized as others because their work wasn't able to be judged.
Right.
But when you really had a chance to see what they were doing, they were fantastic
Wow.
really talented people.
Wow.
My father's father is the number one painter of Jamaica.
Of Jamaica. So was
one
it
and
his
two. There's
exhibit?
two. There's John Dunkley and John Daly.
Was it his exhibit?
Yes,
was
his
just recently
exhibit
in
was
Miami?
here last year in Miami.
In Miami. Wow. Yeah. Right.
And then the New York Times did a piece on his work after they really saw his work and said he's probably one of the greatest painters, painting in the style that he did, somewhat like Rousseau, which was
Wow.
a style that you don't see very much, almost like they call a naive painter, someone that taught themselves how to paint. And but then on my other side, we have the same thing with painters and writers and warriors. You know that on my grandmother's side, her grandparent was Ezekiel Loney, who a slave in Virginia, War of 1812. In 1813, he ran from the plantation because he had heard that the British would offer you freedom somewhere if you were able to get to them. So he ran into the British. How he accomplished that was that he and his brother-in-law were able to run away from the plantation. And that night after that, the owners of us, who are now quite wealthy Virginians, they had to run for their lives, so they ran up into the hills of Virginia, and they were going to send for the slaves in the morning. But at that time, Ezekiel turned around with his brother-in-law, and they came back and they ran with 69 slaves. They took 69 slaves and escaped. They had a boat, and the boat would only hold 69 of them, and they left a whole bunch of them standing on the shore that couldn't fit into the boat, but it's the largest single slave break in American history. And he, so the British at that time offered, it was about 5,000 of us that ran, that got away from slavery at that period, 1813. And we were offered sanctuary in Nova Scotia, where many of us went. But then there was an opportunity for to get even with slavery, and they said that we could join the soldiers and fight back. So Zeke, he chose to join and fight back with the 1,500, approximately 1,500 runaway slaves. And they led the British up the Chesapeake and up the Potomac and burned Washington, D.C.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to give just a little bit of perspective here, because here we're talking about the 1950s. We're going back to Ernest's family background. This is on your which side? Your father, your mother's?
My mother's side.
On his mother's side, who is from Trinidad, right?
Oh, they thought they were, but I had an aunt that I always thought was a little cuckoo, because she used to say, we were never slaves in Trinidad. We were never slaves. I said she got to be nuts, because all black people were slaves in Trinidad at one time. She said, no, we were never slaves, but she never explained that.
Yes, right.
And it wasn't until later that I really...
That you learned.
Yeah, somehow they didn't teach that.
Yeah.
A lot of information was lost.
Yeah, right.
But we were able to get it back, and we were never slaves in Trinidad.
But I do want to give a little bit of it, and then you correct me if I'm wrong here, but during the War of 1812, the British also asked for Africans to assist them in this battle, did they not?
Yeah.
And it's what they did in the Revolutionary War as well.
It's the same
thing.
MO, same modus
So
operandi.
what happened is that in the Revolutionary War, Lord Dunmore asked for Africans to leave the plantations and fight with them against the American revolutionaries,
And
right?
they did.
And they said, if you're with us at the end of the war, we'll offer you freedom.
And they did.
And they did. And many of them went up to Nova Scotia, which is where my family was from in Canada, actually.
Right.
But, okay, so just getting back to the War of 1812, the British asked the same thing of Africans to join them in the War of 1812. And so
We got 1,500. They got 1,500 of us to join.
Wow.
A special branch of their Marines that they were the British Marines, and we were the Royal Colonial Marines. So they had to show that we came from out of the colonies. So we were Marines that were. It was all blacks. There were 6 companies.
All black.
All black.
Oh wow.
They led the British.
Wow.
Because the British couldn't have done it without them, because they knew every nook and cranny up and down Virginia and Maryland and everything.
That makes sense.
And we led them up, and Dolly Madison had to run for her life. She had to run up to Philadelphia.
From the White House.
From the White House.
Yeah, right.
Because we burned it that night.
Yeah.
The Star-Spangled Banner was written on that most wonderful of nights, when Grandpa was burning the White House down.
Right.
And that white man was in there. So when you really study the verses in that "Oh Say Can You See," it talks about that these black people are coming up after us, and we're not going to let slavery go. And those are the other anthems in the song that they never sing. So when these sportsmen kneel down at when they're playing that anthem, I feel a kinship with them, because what was really happening was the slaves were fighting for their children and their mothers and their fathers and their lives. And we need to be on our knees every time they play that racist song. Because if you read what it's talking about killing us and holding us down.
Wow.
So, right on.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment. There's so much to talk about. Stay tuned.
We want to say thank you to everyone who's taken us up on a request to like WRFG 89.3 FM on social media. Just doing this one thing means so much to all of our volunteers who are doing what they need to do to keep themselves and their families safe and healthy, and still bring you the progressive information and hand-picked quality music programs you've come to expect from your independent community radio station. If you haven't liked us yet on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, please do. Our station Facebook page is WRFG 89.3 FM. On Twitter and Instagram, you'll find us at WRFG Atlanta. You'll find direct links to all 3 on our webpage, WRFG.org. And please tell your friends about WRFG and ask them to like us too. In Atlanta, we're 89.3 FM. You can listen to us worldwide over our free mobile app and WRFG.org.
Right, again, my name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace. I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and we're talking about Ernest and his fascinating life and family. So after the War of 1812, then the British, some of your family members decided to go to Trinidad. Is that correct? How did that work?
They didn't quite decide. They had an offer from the British. They could either go to Sierra Leone or they could go to Trinidad. The British really wanted them to stay in the Navy.
Okay.
Because they were such good fighters.
Okay.
So the British, they had they took them to a station that the British had in the Bahamas, which is where they camped after they did the burning of Washington, and the British wanted them to really stay in the Navy. And they said, no, we signed up for this.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
Yeah,
so
right.
they said, okay, and they said, and we prefer to go to Trinidad. So they sent the 800 remaining soldiers
Okay.
From the 6 companies to Trinidad and put us on I believe, the south side of the island.
Wow.
Which was where there was no slavery.
Okay.
Because slavery was still enforced in Trinidad. So
did the British make that decision, or did? Or
the British made that decision.
Okay,
The British are wonderful people, boy.
Okay.
They know how to jerk you around.
Right. Okay.
Whoa. So yeah, they gave us property in the southern side of Trinidad. I believe it was 6 companies had 6 townships.
Right.
And they called the company towns there.
Okay.
And up until this day, no one knew what they were there for, because the British never told the rest of the island what those other black people or who those other black people were on the other side of the island. And my sister just wrote a school book.
Her name is Tina.
Tina
Dunkley,
Dunkley, yes,
yeah.
an artist, fantastic artist.
No, she did an exhibit
Yes.
that's been at the Auburn Avenue Research Library.
On the family, on this whole
On the family,
experience of the War of 1812 and black
Yeah.
people.
Right.
We were known as the enemy within. The British were the enemy without, and the enemy within were the slaves that they couldn't control. And so she calls her exhibition "The Enemy Within," about those of us that were the enemy within, that fought back and were able to. They all wanted to. They just weren't in a position to do it.
What do you mean to fight back? Against the British or against the...
Against whoever had their
was
foot around their
trying to
neck, who was holding
enslave.
that chain. British, French, Spanish,
fair enough, fair
Portuguese,
enough.
it didn't matter.
Exactly.
But to get away. So
Right.
we got a deal from the devil, one of the devils. One of the devils say, you work with us and we'll set you free over here. Meanwhile, he had other people chained up on the other side of the island. So there were more men than women at this time that had gotten away. So the men went to the other side of the island and bought slaves for wives and built families.
And that was your mother's side of the family.
That was her. Well,
It was your mother's family.
yes,
In
that was my
Trinidad.
mother's family, and Grandpa, he happened to run with his grandma. He got her out. She was one of the 69 people on that boat that he was able to get, of 69 slaves that they
Wow.
were able to get out, and their children, which were
So-
2 at the time.
So I'm curious, was your mother, were you talking about this when you were young as well?
No, never.
Oh.
We didn't find out
why is that? do you
because
think?
I don't know that they knew.
I see.
Because
You
my
don't know if they
aunt
knew the
knew, the
history, huh?
oldest children knew.
Okay.
And then they didn't know the total history of the American maybe War of 1812.
Right.
They knew that we were there and that we had come there from America. And
Right.
and she didn't even say that we had come from America. She just knew, and this is my oldest aunt,
Right.
that we were not slaves, that we had a plantation. And we weren't slaves.
Right.
We owned land. Because they gave each one of the soldiers, I think, 16 acres. Each was given 16
Okay.
acres. And then they
Not 40 acres, but
16, but they were allowed to buy and build and
Oh,
expand.
okay.
So
So Ernest, would you say that experience, did that affect the attitude of your family? I mean, was it
all
more
of us
more
have been
confidence or anything
affected.
like
No,
that?
no,
or-
all of us, every black person has been affected.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah,
Every slave
Right.
descendant
right.
has been affected, whether
Right.
they were on the very black side and were brutalized, or they got very light and were able to get away with the lighter duties in the establishment,
Right.
which makes them who they are today. Makes us who we are today.
Right.
And that's, what do they call that nowadays when it happens to a soldier? PTSD.
The PTSD, yeah.
They recognize it among the soldiers, but they don't recognize it among blacks who have been under constant PTSD from when we came here up until now, with our thousands and thousands of men in prison
Right.
on BS.
Exactly. Exactly.
For BS, for
Right.
bull crap.
Right. Right.
But and you don't recognize that there's some sort of stress going on in the community, and they know that. That's why they know that they can herd us like animals and
Right.
force the young ones to do things that they're not ready to do,
Yeah.
so they can snatch them down and label them as convicts and felons and criminals. And, catch you. I can remember when, if you had a seed in your pocket, black boy, around Texas, you went to jail for 7 years.
Wow. Well, we'll have more of a discussion about this, and I just want listeners to know that this is just the beginning of talking with Ernest about his life, because there's so much left out here. He spent some time in Central America, 17 or 18 years in Nigeria. How many years? in Nigeria?
About that, 17, 18.
17, 18 years.
You
We wanna
lose
talk-
track after
We're
a
gonna
while.
be talking about all those remarkable experiences. So this was really when you began to learn about the Trinidadian background. I'm sure that was quite an experience for you.
Yes, but I don't know. It's just icing on the cake.
Yeah, right.
But it opened up a door. No, it wasn't an experience because it opened up a door to how much is hidden from us.
Yeah, right.
You know, there's this movie that Get Out.
Right.
And Get Out, is they say, is a science fiction movie about what could happen if white people took over the bodies of black people and replaced it with their minds, put their minds in there, and and live with these black bodies, these strong black bodies. But I say that's not science fiction. That's ancient history that we're looking at. And that we've been taken out of everything that is civilization and said that we had no part of it. And when you're told that you are nothing and they drive it in your head, the older ones that know that there's something after they die out, the younger ones don't have anything to protect themselves with, no memories of a time. And at this point now, you're open to be turned into anything they want to turn you into. And they turn us into a lot of different things.
No, it's absolutely true. Right. So just getting back yet again to Trinidad, and that, so the community, they were called the Maroons, right?
We weren't Maroons. No. We were a type of maroon.
Right.
But we weren't like the other Maroons.
Well, what are the other Maroons like?
The other Maroons, they killed up the British or the Portuguese and ran into the mountains.
Oh, okay.
We killed them in America first, and then when we were made legal in Trinidad, so we weren't really marooned. We just had whole properties that were ours. So the soldiers weren't trying to come and kill us again, or to break up our settlement as they were with the Maroons.
Okay, I'm glad you made that correction because I appreciate that.
But we functioned like a Maroon.
Like the Maroon community,
we were retired Maroons.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Ernest, I just want to tell you, it's just fascinating learning about the background, the various cultural experiences you've had, and just about your family history. It's just fascinating. Thank you.
Hey, you're quite welcome. And it gets me too every time I look at it.
Yeah, it's just fascinating.
And there's more to come.
There's more to come. We're going to continue this discussion with Ernest because there's so much to learn just about you and your family and your background. Ernest is fascinating. So, and I'm going to ask everyone to stay tuned for Revolutionary African Perspectives, and Ernest and I will be back on the program next week.
Yes, we will, and thank you again, Heather.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Child who learns to sing a new song, in every hand that held set us free. Truth will set us free. We cannot spend our way out of debt. We cannot spend our way out of debt. We spin and spin the earth around. We cannot spend our way out of debt. Greed will destroy us. Amen. Greed will destroy us. Amen. Greed will destroy us. Amen. Love will set us free. Love will set us free. We cannot war our way to peace. We cannot war our way to peace. We spin and spin and spin and spin around. We cannot war our way to peace. Violence will destroy us. Amen. Violence will destroy us. Violence will destroy us. Amen. And peace will set us free. Peace will set us free. Peace will set us. Peace is gonna set